G'day guys and welcome back. Today I will be making a pasta board out of solid timber for my neighbour across the road because apparently she likes to make pasta by hand, mixing flour and eggs together. You make a dough and then you roll it out as pasta or spaghetti or whatever they make out of it. Not really my forte. My forte is cutting timber to length in order to make a wider panel, and when I do make this wider panel and I glue it up, I want to make sure that I glue it up dead flat, so I don't want a step to be between any of the boards because I want to be able to use the glued up surface as my reference when I put the breadboard ends onto the end of this pasta board, because a breadboard end, pasta board, baker's board, pastry board, bread board, that's what a breadboard end is for. It's to keep these panels nice and flat into the future. So right now I'm going to put a big spline groove into the end of these boards so that I can put a spline in afterwards, and that way when I glue it up it'll keep all of those boards aligned absolutely spot on perfectly. Now I'm using the router by hand here quite specifically so that if any of those boards are a little bit cupped, if I put that over the router table to put that spline groove in, it might not necessarily be dead center or a perfect distance from the top down, whereas if I use a hand router it gets it perfect every single time. I really do hate using the splines in a glue up like this because it makes it very difficult to glue it up. I've got to get all this glue squeezed out of that joint in order to bring the joint together, and I wasn't able to do it with my own physical power, so I need to put a lot of force into those clamps just to squeeze it so tightly, just to squeeze out all of that excess glue. But clamps are pretty strong and it does it pretty easily. It's just a little bit more of an annoyance. And those two longer strips that I just cut off will be used later on to be glued back on to create a bit of a bench hook so that you can put the pasta board down on your bench, push it up against the edge of your bench, and it'll stop at a specific point, and that'll allow you to roll out the dough without the pasta board slipping and sliding all over your bench. And part of the reason why they do want a timber pasta board is because apparently a stone bench top, it sucks out all of the heat out of their dough mixture, and that's not very good apparently, but timber is temperature stable apparently, so that's why they want a timber one. So here I'm just cutting the mortises to accept the bread build ends. It's a little bit dicey balancing the router on such a skinny piece, but I don't know, like, you live dangerously and then we all end up in the same place eventually anyway, so whatever works. So there I want to cut the tenon for the breadboard. I think this is a pretty good way of going about it. It looks a little bit dicey, but I don't mind doing it. It doesn't stress me out. Yeah, so I don't really need to be going to the trouble of putting breadboard ends on this, because I could have just given them a flat panel of timber and said, here you go, that would be good enough. But I thought, I'll go the extra mile and do it properly, the traditional way. And I'm not unhappy about doing it this way. I know I've done the right thing by them. Seems good enough. I'm happy with it. They're happy with it. Everyone's happy with it. It does take quite a lot more time though, doesn't it? But it's times like this that I really enjoy going to the trouble of doing all of the fancy joinery. When it just works, and it's just so satisfying to see everything just come together, and you get the nicest, neatest, crispest joint between those two panels that you could possibly have. Look at that, just beautiful. Got lucky again. So now I've got to join that breadboard end to the panel by using dowels. So the center dowel will just be straight in the middle, but the two on the outside, I have to allow for this panel to expand and contract. So when I put the slots into the tenons, I need to put just a single hole into the center of the board, but the two on the outer ends, they need to be an open slot so that the timber can actually slide backwards and forward through the seasons. Or it's not necessarily through the seasons, because this is used for food preparation. It's actually going to be washed and then dried and then washed and then dried, and so it's going to be in a constant state of flux where it's expanding and contracting throughout the day. So if I don't open up these slots right now, this board will crack within a week. So now I'm just roughly eyeballing how much glue I'm going to put into this. Just that center portion will be glued, and then the outer ends do not get glued, which allows that timber to float inside those slots to allow it to expand and contract so it doesn't crack. Expand and contract so it doesn't crack. Oh yeah! Because the glue is water based, it actually swells up the joinery. Now the joinery was pretty tight beforehand, so now that the joints are swollen up a little bit, it's very tight, so you just have to hit it with the hammer a few extra times. It does come together, but it's always good to throw a clamp over it just to get it together. Give it a few taps and it will come together exactly perfectly, and then you can take the clamp off and start putting in the dowel pins to hold everything in there forever and ever and ever. That's the center pin that's well and truly covered in glue. It doesn't really matter how much glue you put in there, because that doesn't actually move. But on the two pins on the outside, you do need to put some glue in there so that the pins don't fall out. But you have to make sure you don't get glue on the inside of the joint, because that joint has to remain loose. You have to allow it to be able to move with the seasons or with the moisture changes in the board. So I've hammered in the dowel most of the way, and then I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the end, tap it the rest of the way, and that will just put glue on the top surface of that breadboard end and not on the panel itself on the inside of the joint, if that makes any sense. One final trim to trim off those long daggy ends, and then we can smooth out this surface because it's a little bit ratty with glue covered all over it. You can probably see down the center of that board there's a bit of a black mark where a clamp was. Now that's an iron tannin stain between the steel bar of the clamp and the timber itself, and it leaves a black mark when there's a little bit of moisture involved. Now a lot of people really stress about that, and they put sticky tape all over their clamps or over where the clamp is going to be on the timber to try to avoid all of that. I personally don't worry about it because it's not that deep. You can simply plane it away with a few swipes of a hand plane and it's just gone. And it's not something like it's gone, but if you look at it funny it comes back, or you put water on it and it comes back. No, it's just literally gone. So a few swipes of the hand plane and it's gone, so I don't stress too much about it. There's one little spot right in the middle. Bye bye baby, gone forever. And a quick sand just to smooth out the surface. Rough it up just that little bit because I'm going to have to sand this later anyway, so now's a good time. And these are the two strips that I cut off earlier, which I'm going to glue back onto the board to create the stops, so that it can hook onto the end of the bench, or the one that sits up above the bench can stop flour from shooting too far forward and making a big old mess, because I know that when I cook or bake or do anything in the kitchen, there's a big old mess left behind. These fancy tools of mine sure do make a job bloody easy. Especially this sander. I love this sander so much. Now here's really important. I don't want any glue to go on the inside of the board, but any glue that squeezes out onto that back edge doesn't really matter because that's really easy to clean up. So I'm putting a lot of pressure on that front edge and I'm trying to roll it back so that will push all of the glue back towards me, leaving the inside corner nice and clean just like that. Now I'd like to say there's a lot of skill involved there, but there's a huge amount of luck as well. So I actually got really lucky here. And that way when it comes to cleaning up, I can just clean off the glue globs, and then I'll come back with a hand plane and smooth it out. Too easy. And I don't have to worry about that internal corner, which is actually very difficult to clean up. But because I didn't get any glue to squeeze out, there's nothing to clean up. So a little bit of effort goes a long, long way sometimes. Too easy. Then I just want to round out every single edge or corner or crevice so that there are no sharp edges, because those sharp edges are absolutely brutal if you ever accidentally drag your knuckles across them. If you've ever done it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and if you haven't done it, try not to, because you'll know exactly what I'm talking about and you won't enjoy it. So that's it there. That's our pasta board, our pastry board, our baking board. That lip there stops the flour from going too far on your bench. The lip behind here hooks onto the end of your bench so you can roll the dough. But the last thing I want to do is I want to wet this down with a bit of just water straight out of the tap, and that will allow the timber grain to raise up. At the moment it's very smooth, but as the water absorbs into the timber, it'll raise up and become very rough. I'll let that dry. I'll come back with a little bit of sandpaper, give it a very light hand sand just to smooth it out again, and that should remain smooth during the course of its use with whatever she does with this thing. She makes pasta by hand apparently. So thank you very much for watching. I will be back with another video at some point, so remember to hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next ones. See ya.